Hey everybody, Jim Edwards here, and welcome back to the Sales Copywriting and Content Marketing Hacks Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Edwards, along with my trusty co-host and podcast producer, Mr. Stu Smith. Welcome, Stu.
Hey, Jim.
Today's podcast is episode 109, The Secrets of Telling Stories. Now, everyone knows that stories are the key to generating more sales in your business, no matter what you sell or who you sell it to. And if you want to take your stories to the next level, we're going to share with you during this podcast 3 tips to take your stories and make them absolutely compelling and amazing. Again, no matter what you sell or who you sell it to. Stu.
Yes.
What's the first thing we're going to talk about?
Well, we're just going to talk about the power of storytelling. And, you have done a really good job at being able to tell stories with your content. You actually just told a great story in the preamble to this podcast in our Jim and Stu Show Live segment, just about your story of your day and repurposing or being productive and telling a story about being productive. So, I mean, you can tell stories about anything, and it doesn't have to be about you. It could be a story of someone else. I mean, how many people have told stories of, the local hero, from World War II? I mean, there's so many stories that, every day is a story. So my advice, number one, is look at stories as flexible tools you can use in your sales copy.
Absolutely. And you can use them in a bunch of different ways. So you can use a story as the main driver in let's say in your sales letter or in your sales video. The story, if you tell the right kind of story, some kind of backstory or an epiphany bridge story, which are really just hero's journey, derivations of the hero's journey, but that can carry the weight of a huge part of your sales letter or your sales video, because what really gets people to buy is getting them into an emotional state. And stories get people into emotional states faster than virtually anything else you can do in sales copy. Now, there are faster ways to get somebody to an emotional state in real life, but we're not talking about things like that. We're talking about sales copy, sales presentations, videos. Also, for some reason, we're just hardwired to love stories. I mean, since little kids, look at your grandkids, your kids, they'll, how many times do they tell you, hey, tell me a story, especially if you're halfway decent at it. A few years ago, Stu came down for a visit. We were shooting some guns, doing some working out. And I was taking my grandkids to school, and I was like, hey, dude, you want to ride with us? And he's like, yeah, sure. I don't want to stick around your house with nobody here, so I might as well ride with you to take the kids. And you remember they were sitting in the back. They're like, Grandpa, tell us a story. And I felt a little weird telling the story of Moose and Elmo and doing the voices and stuff in front of you. And I was like, this dude, what's he going to think of this?
It was the best. I'm telling you. He has a great Elmo voice. And it was so funny. He was cracking me up.
The funny thing is that stories, it's no different. I mean, it's $1 billion business called the movie industry. It's a gajillion dollar business called TV. It's, everything from Netflix to the Hallmark Channel to Prime Video, everything's built around a story. You can turn anything into a story. I started watching, I don't know if it's kind of a guilty pleasure on Netflix, but Last Chance You ever watch that? Well, it's the last 3 or 4 seasons have been about football teams, and they're doing one now about basketball team in East Los Angeles. And they turn this into a story, the story of how these kids go through this season, and they've had all these disadvantages. I mean, it's stories, layers of stories within stories within stories. Each kid has a story that plays into the story as as of the whole team and of the city and of the university. If you think about it, Larry just said something interesting. Real life is a story. You're telling the story of your own life, and people love stories, and stories can bring you to tears. Did you cry at the end of Old Yeller, Stu? I did.
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay. Did you cry at the end of E.T.?
Any dog movie makes you
E.T.?
cry. Yes.
Okay.
I was a
So
kid.
I watched it a few years ago and cried at the end of E.T. I ain't gonna lie. The thing is, though, that you've heard the phrase people buy an emotion and they justify on logic. Most people, when they try and sell, they try and sell people on logic. That's their sales copy is all features and stuff. And that's not what makes people buy. And I just laugh when people say, well, I sell to a corporate audience. So what? A corporate audience is people who have fears and desires and questions and problems and roadblocks. And they have their current identity and the identity that they want to be and all this other stuff that factors in that they're just human beings. And stories are what sell people. So your ability to tell a story is super, super important. And when you understand the basic framework of a story, which you've heard the hero's journey, I mean, we can even make it we make it even simpler. It has 3 acts. Okay. The first act is setting the stage. The second act is the conflict. And then the third act is the resolution. That's it. It's set the stage, conflict, and resolution. That's what makes a story. You got to have an enemy. You got to have something to push against, a circumstance, something beyond your control, a mistake. There's some sort of fulcrum, a turning point that always happens and creates the conflict. So you can use the story at the beginning. You can use the story to tell just about yourself. So thinking about a long form sales letter, you can put when you get to the part where it says, now that's a tall promise. And at this point you might be asking, who is Jim Edwards to teach me about sales copy? Well, let me tell you a quick story, which there's a tip right there. If you ever want to tell somebody a story or you ever want to use a story, all you got to say is, hey, let me tell you a quick story. Let me tell you something happened to me the other day. In fact, people hunger for stories so much that they have learned to ask questions of other people to try and get them to tell a story without even knowing it. Hey, Stu, what's new? What's going on in your life? What's new with your kids? What's new with your wife? What's new with Parker? What's Parker up to? How's it going with beagles and, or all dogs, no politics? I mean, you're trying to get people to tell you a story so that you can be engaged. It drops little endorphins in your bloodstream, and it just feels good to listen to stories, especially stories at extremes. You want to listen to a story with a wonderful ending and an exciting ending so it makes you feel inspired, maybe even a little jealous, maybe a little bit, hey man, I wish I could do that. And then you want to hear stories with real crap endings or real hard, scary circumstances. So you can say, damn.
I'm glad that's not me, buddy. Woo!
And that's what we are programmed for whatever reason to love stories. Don't overanalyze it, just use it and understand that you can use it in emails, you can use it in videos, in lives and other stuff, and just try different stuff and see which ones hit. See the stories that really get people to resonate with what you're doing.
And don't worry about how long it is. It doesn't have to be long. In fact, it needs to be kind of short. If you're placing this in the middle of your sales copy, like last week we had that 6-word story challenge. We did. That was kind of fun. Little difficult, but you can tell a story in 2 sentences. Tell a story in 1 sentence. But I mean, you can make the picture that you want to project in a very short period. It doesn't have to be, 2 paragraphs long, to get it done, or 2 pages even.
But on the flip side, you also want to make sure that you're giving enough detail that you can giving enough detail
Sure.
so that you can accomplish what you want from the story. It's I think what we're trying to say is you need to be strategic and you need to be on purpose with what you're doing. If the purpose of the story is to just intrigue somebody and get them to click a link in an email, you don't want to tell a 12 paragraph story. You can do it with a couple sentences.
True.
If the other purpose of the story is to establish yourself and your credibility and to take them on the journey that you went on so that they're mentally ready for the offer that you're going to give them, then it needs to be a little bit longer. If you're telling a story to two rambunctious kids that you want them to go to bed and your show is starting in 10 minutes, that story is only going to last 9 minutes. I can tell you. That's it. It ain't going any longer. Tell us more. That's for tomorrow night. So, and I think part of that is being able to fill the time needed. You got to understand what the purpose is in telling the story. You don't want to be the old guy that just bores the crap out of everybody with telling a story. You want to be the person that they look forward to hearing the story and they're like, oh yeah, this is something new. So that's important too. The story should fill the time needed, but you definitely don't want to ramble. And I got to be careful of that. I don't know. I think it's called getting older, that you just want to fill in all the details. But
Could be.
Sometimes you can tell a story better by leaving some of the details out and letting people fill them in. I think about the difference between, like, have you ever read a Tom Clancy book?
Oh, sure.
Okay. He's a great storyteller, but I can't read his books because he goes into so much detail. It gets very tedious. Some of those things, and the Navy SEAL had the Smith & Wesson M&P 15 converted with an auto sear that was positioned in you know what I mean? And it's, using an ACOG model 537 with a 3X model, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, come on, man, I just want the story. And on the flip side, you don't want to have so little detail, though, that people are like, that's it. I saw a dog. The dog got hit by a car. It was sad.
A good way to have the reader add to the story is by simply asking a question. Right? Is this you? Right? Imagine this. You arrive at SEAL training, unsure if you're fully prepared, but after a few days, you realize you got this.
Right.
These programs will do that for you.
But don't get cocky.
Yeah. Are you worried about challenging yourself?
Right. Yeah. Or how would you feel in this situation? Or how would you feel if this happened to you? Does this make sense? And how do you, so that's a great point. Asking a question, they'll fill in a whole bunch of blanks and then keep moving on down the trail.
Yeah.
Which is a good one. So, and what's the third secret that we want to talk about? So the first secret was look at stories as flexible tools. The second secret was let the story fill the time needed, but don't ramble. What's the third one, Stu?
Choose your purpose and tie your moral back to the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you a quick story. When I was a little kid, I used to read my mom's college textbooks. I would read college. She majored in history. I majored in history as well, mainly because I'd already read all the books by the time I was 13 and I wanted to drink when I was in college. So the thing was that I also read a whole lot of other books. Like I would read any mythology book I could get my hands on, like adult books about mythology. I read Roman mythology, Greek mythology, and I noticed that they were very similar. I'm like, hey, Mom, isn't this the same one that's in this other one? They're just calling them two different things. And she said, yep, absolutely right. But this is when I first realized that stories had morals. Then I was introduced to Aesop's fables and those things where they had, purposely morals. But every story, every myth had a moral, it had a purpose, it had a reason, a takeaway that you were supposed to have. Don't like the narcissist, the guy who was trapped looking into the pool in love with his own reflection. And then the whole moral of that, even as a 5 or 6 year old, I was like, or not 5 or 6, maybe 9 years old. You're thinking, okay, well, that means, like my dad would say, don't start believing your own press releases. Okay, this is you don't be in love with your own ideas and your own self and all that stuff. And a lot of times where people get bogged down in being able to tell a story is they think, okay, I got to figure out how to tell a story. I got to figure out, I need a story to tell in this email. I need a story to tell in this sales letter. I need a story. I can't think of a story. I can't think of a story, Stu. And then they're screwed, because as soon as you start telling yourself you can't do something, you can't do something. So I never tried to think of a story. I think of the moral that I want someone to take away from the story. And then I think about, okay, what is an emotional point in my life or an emotional point in somebody else's life that I know of, or circumstances or something. And then because I know how to structure a story using the hero's journey, then I just work backwards. So here's the conclusion I want everybody to come to, or here's the emotional state I want them to be in. Here is not an apex, but the low point, the emotional low point of a story that fits that objective. And then I just build the story around it for whatever I need it for. And if you do that, all of a sudden you'll have more stories than you know what to do with. And so that's the other thing that you just really, really want to get in touch with, is don't just tell stories for the sake of telling stories, because then you end up with a story, and all of us have read a story, all of us have heard somebody say something, and you're like, what's the point? What is the whole point of this? I remember I was in Florida 3 years ago at Funnel Hacking Live. There was a guy on stage who was telling a story. His whole presentation for 30 minutes was a story about how his wife was dealing with terrible Lyme disease. I mean, he was showing videos and stuff of her having seizures and all this other stuff, was telling this, it was heartbreaking. But the whole time he was telling the story, I was waiting for it to come up the other side. I was waiting for the redemption. I was waiting for the point. And I never got it. I never saw the point. I never got it. And everybody was just kind of like, I feel terrible for him. I feel terrible for his wife, but I don't understand what the purpose was of him doing that, of telling us a story. There was kind of a moral of love your family and be loyal and all this other stuff, but it didn't have the resolution. It was like a French film, the dog died and it was the end. And I still think back and feel terrible, and I feel terrible for feeling terrible, like criticizing it, because I'm not. I'm just like, it didn't have the moral. It didn't have the thing at the end to take us to the next step. And if you don't do that, you're really wasting an opportunity, and can actually confuse people and hurt your sales by not doing it properly. Any thoughts on that, Stu?
No, that's a tough road to go down. Like to go down that journey and then not be able to get picked back up. You're right. It's like the ending of a sad movie. I mean, I remember watching I guess it was Lone Survivor.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember when that happened, how that made me feel. Right. I mean, it was devastating, when that many people that, I knew died. And I remember going through the movie again. I remember I felt like I was at a funeral, after walking out of the movie theater. I mean, it was a happy ending for one guy, but still, that was one of those movies that just left you in that bottom,
Yeah.
right? And it's a good movie. It's a good movie, makes you think. I mean, I thought about that movie for 2 weeks, after that. So there is a purpose for that kind of, bring you down and make you almost fight your way out of it.
Yeah.
Like to get back to a resolution internally.
Yeah.
But you can't do that in sales copy.
No, no. You can do that for art.
Yeah.
Don't do that in your sales copy. It's gotta, now don't spoon feed it to them to the point where they're like, come on,
right. Yeah.
You're just manipulating me now. It's and part of that is being authentic when you're telling stories. If you're telling authentic, real stories and you're using the right framework to tell the story, it takes care of itself. Carlin just said, let people's experiences feel in the details, or fill in the details, or feel by filling in the details. That's critical. And Deborah just said, make the story match the message. And
another thing on that too, Jim, sorry to interrupt, but if you can tell a story in a way that is somewhat contradictory to your current situation, that is very appealing. I mean, when I tell people that I failed fitness tests when I first got into the military, people don't understand that.
Right.
It'd be like, the fitness instructor who's lost 150 pounds and became a triathlete.
Right.
People don't expect that journey to occur, but he shares a lot of the struggles that, his future clients will share. So
what makes you empathetic? And and when you can tell a story like that, it's one of the reasons why I don't enjoy telling the story of living in the trailer for 7 years. It sucked. Let me tell you what, living in a trailer park for 7 years sucks the big one. Having people, steal stuff from your yard that you can't afford to replace, siphoning gas, people stealing your heating oil, it sucks. I mean, kids out of control, feral children roving in gangs. And, I'm sitting there trying to make web pages and hear windows break. I hear a window break in my own trailer, and catching the kids throwing a rock through my bathroom window in the trailer, and knowing that if I take them to their parents, I'm either going to have a fight with the dad because I know who it is, or the kid's going to come back and light the trailer on fire, and just basically screaming cuss words at him and tell him to get the hell out and never come back. And then literally having no money to replace the glass. So for 2 years, I had duct tape on my bathroom window, and it was considered normal. I mean, but when you tell people, they fill in the blanks. It's a great story looking back. It sucks writing the story when you're in the middle of it. But that's the thing.
You're probably not writing a story about your current situation.
But you
know what I mean?
But I wish I'd had I knew that something was going to change. I knew that it was things were going to turn around. I wish I had more pictures of me in the trailer park. I wish I had more pictures of me as Fat Jim. I wish I had more pictures to be able to show, like, this sucked. I mean, you think that sucks? Look at this. I mean, look at this rusty, nasty shed that I had to, it was just, but then, you think about, well, what was wrong with me that I would actually live in those circumstances, and all these other things that, that's why I don't really like to revel in it, because I would look at me and be like, well, what the hell was wrong with you then? And, I don't even want to talk about that. What did you do to actually turn it around? And what I did to turn it around was totally change myself mentally, which I had to do. I had to totally reinvent myself mentally on every level to be able to transform myself. And I did that by telling a different story about who I was and what my life was all about and what I was capable of.
And learning sales copy.
And learning learning valuable skills.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the other thing. You got to have a skill that people are willing to pay you for. The way you make money is by having something of value to exchange for people that they're willing to pay you money for. So anyway, we digress as usual. But the number one thing is just, you can't tell a story just for the sake of telling a story. There's got to be a point, there's got to be a moral, and it's got to be an issue, or it's got to be something that fits with the message that you're trying to that you're trying to get across. So there you go. Wow, we've gone over.
Yeah.
So that was good. All right. So, okay. Well, now it's time for the obligatory call to action. For those of you who want to learn how to write amazing sales copy, Copywriting Secrets has been called a modern day classic. If you go to copywritingsecrets.com, you can get a free copy of the book, just pay shipping and handling. I highly recommend that you pick up the Order Bump, which is the audiobook version. Had a bunch of people tell us that the audiobook version is amazing. And the cool thing about the audiobook is that it has a bunch of extras in it, because I sat down and read the book to Stu, and then Stu asked me a bunch of questions after each chapter. So there's additional stuff that isn't in the book. It's fun. It's rollicking, titillating in parts, and we'll definitely make some nice addition to the edition that you can pick up. So there you go. And Stu, if they want to get in amazing physical shape, where should they go?
They can go to StuSmithFitness.com.
That's
Pretty
right.
simple.
And that's what I did. And somebody asked, hey, how did you two guys meet? And maybe we'll tell that story next time.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, everybody have a wonderful day. And we will see you on the next episode of the Sales Copywriting and Content Marketing Hacks podcast. Also, head on over to the JimEdwardsMethod.com, sign up, and you'll be notified about the Jim and Stu show.